All right, Buzz babies, and welcome back to another episode of Blake's Buzz. I have a insane treat for me, you, anybody who's listening, watching this episode. I have enjoyed this man's writing for a very long time. I'm so excited to get to talk to him. He's got some amazing new books out. He's also roaming around in Gotham doing putting Bruce through the ringer. I've got Romvi in the house. Oh my God, Rom. How are you, sir? So happy to have you.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Thanks for that very cool intro. And yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about comics, writing, books, Bruce Wayne.
Now, I do because you are, you're in Gotham, and you've had your tendrils in a lot of elements of DC, right? Over the last couple of years, I think you wowed us all in so many ways with Swamp Thing. You took Selena Kyle for a fun ride, right? And now you've landed at you're in Detective Comics. You're at like one of the one of the two Bat books, right? That like everybody wants to be on. Slumming it up in Gotham. When you found out that they were like, when you were getting Detective, what was that? I mean, like, was it a phone call, a Zoom call, an email? Did you kind of know it was coming? Like, what was that experience like?
No, so when I finished my Swamp Thing run and my Catwoman run, it wasn't as much as them coming to me and telling me, hey, we'd like you to be on Detective. It was more, I got in touch with my editors and I said, look, I feel like I want to move to a bigger book where I can write events that have consequences for all of the characters. Part of the thing with Catwoman is you can't really change too much because whatever change happens to Catwoman has to stem from the Bat book, if you see what I mean, because she's such a Bat character, like a Gotham character, right? Whereas Detective felt like it had its own power and sway. So I went to my editor and I said, look, I kind of want to do a bigger book that I feel like has some real consequences for the character. So I said, yeah, whenever Detective opens up, I'd love to get on that one. Or if the Green Lantern book opens up, I'd love to get on that one. Because I had story ideas for both. Obviously, I had this sort of Batman as Gothic opera take that I wanted to do as well. And so I sent that, I had that conversation, sent it in, and they were like, okay, cool. If that happens, we'll be in touch. And it wasn't a time where I had an exclusive or anything with DC. I was still doing other work. I was doing work at Marvel as well. So it wasn't a sure thing. And then 2 months after that, my editor, Jessica Chen, got in touch with me and she said, hey, so you remember that conversation we had about Detective? What would you do if that was a possibility? If that was a reality, what would your pitch be? And I was like, of course I would do Batman as grand tragedy and opera. And she went, that's so weird, but we love it. Could you send in a formal pitch? And then I sent in a formal pitch and got approved, I think 2 weeks after. And they were like, cool, when do we get the first script? So once it happened, it happened pretty rapidly. As for how I felt, like oddly, I've never been the kind of person to be intimidated by something I'm writing. I get frustrated by things where I'm like, I need to get this right because, this is the first time I'm doing a Bat book, or this is the first time I'm doing a thing at DC, or this is the first time I'm writing a script for animation kind of thing. But I've never been intimidated by something. I've been motivated to get it right. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, your motivation is working, sir. I would like to say I'm behind. Like, unfortunately, one of the downsides to like being press and like working in comics, I've found
read
is
so
like,
many comics.
Yeah, and you don't always get to read what you want to read, right? It's like sometimes you got to read stuff for work or like prepping for interviews. Luckily, you know, when I get to interview people like you, like that kind of homework is a lot more enjoyable than, you know, other times sometimes. But you, so, you
Sure.
know, it's a lot of,
Now
I call it
I always
podcast
think it's
homework.
funny. Sometimes I'll get reviewers who are like, "Ah, man, I love Ron V, but it's very hard to review his books because I have to read like 30 of them, and so his books are always ones that I can't just like go skim through." I'm like, why would I write for someone who wants to skim through my
Yeah, that's,
books?
I would not, if I did do that, I would not say that publicly to anybody. Like, oh man, like I like this writer, but like I actually have to read.
I have to read
No,
20 other books, so I'm not gonna read this writer's books because they make me engage with their work.
yeah. How dare you for challenging me as a reader, giving me something to think about and maybe a little bit of dialogue to read. How dare you? No, yeah, I don't play like that. Everybody who's it makes me feel very good, and it's a trend that I will continue forever. But everybody I've interviewed has always been like, you actually read my stuff and came ready to play, and I really appreciate
Yeah,
that. And
great.
that,
I mean, and also like that's the contract, right, with between the reader and the writer. The
mm,
writer endeavors for the reader to engage with their work,
yeah,
and the reader engages with their work, and in which case it shouldn't be just a 5 minute read. It shouldn't be something you skim through and toss aside like it didn't make any difference, you know.
yeah, yeah. That's, oh man, is it hard when you get comment? Because like I've even noticed, and I'm, you know, I'm not a writer, and I'm definitely not working at Marvel or DC, right? But even with like my job and working with some indie publishers and stuff, like I have to, and I'm not used to this, like I have to watch my mouth every now and then, right? Like you can't, I used to be like, if someone made me mad online, I'd be like, I'm going to tell you about it, you know. And now I've learned, like, you know, other people see these
Oh
things
yeah,
you
no, I
say.
mean, I get it, but I don't really engage with
You know,
any of
okay,
that stuff online.
okay, it's probably healthier, like mentally
I
healthier.
always find it as a I always look at it as a point of curiosity. Like
Okay.
it's always funny. It's always interesting to me the way people review books, or the way, or what they find is the reason why a book is great or why a book is bad.
Hmm.
Because, and I've said this before online, like every review, as much as it is a window into my work, for me, it's a window into the reviewer's mind. So I'm reading them from this place of morbid curiosity of like, I wonder what this person is like. Let me see what I can make of them by reading their review. Um, yeah, but I don't really engage with it. I've had tons of great reviews. I've had tons of bad reviews.
Hmm.
All of that is fine. It's part of the work. Um, my job ends the moment the script has sort of left my desk and the book has gone to print.
Okay.
So anything that happens after that, it's like I've let the bird fly off from my hands, and I'm watching it fly away in the distance. You know.
Well, that's good. Like I said, it's for me anyway. It's like it's healthier, right? It's
Yeah, yeah. You can't.
less tedious things to be mad about is not bad for the psyche, right? Like,
Yeah, and also it's not. I mean, there are bigger, more important things in the world
definitely,
to be concerned with,
yeah.
and um, yeah, I don't do the work for the reviews. I do the work because I like engaging with people on that sort of narrative, cognitive level, right?
Mm.
And I said this to a collaborator. Like they came to me the other day on a book, upcoming book. Um, they came to me the other day and they said, "Hey, I'm chatting. We haven't really done a lot of PR. We haven't really done like. Do you expect there will be a lot of podcasts and interviews to do?" I'm like, "Yeah, there'll be some, but I told them like the real thing that will bring you tremendous joy is not which podcast you're on or which interview you're doing or what the reviewer said. The real thing that will bring you joy is when some random person DMs you and goes like, your book made me cry and I haven't cried after reading a comic in like so many years. I'm a 44-year-old man and you've made me cry. What's going on?" I love that sort of reaction. I always love people coming up to me at shows and going like, I don't actually read comics, but my husband does, and he had this book, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, lying around, and I read it, and I think I might be someone who reads comics now.
Oh,
You
cool.
know, that kind of stuff is always more interesting, engaging, gives me more joy than good or bad reviews for
Oh
that matter.
yeah, yeah. I could definitely see that. I've been that person that comes up to tables at cons and is like, your words made me feel, and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
those
exactly.
conversations are so fun, right? And you guys like it and are appreciative, and as a fan, press, all whatever I am, right? It's just like it's a cool experience, and that's one of the reasons why I love comics and just reading. I've always, as a kid, like I've always read, and it's just like that transportive magic, right? That like it temporarily takes you someplace, and your shoulders get a little lighter, and the bullshit weighing you down, gets a little less
Yeah,
heavy, and
you
those
forget
those little
for a
moments,
moment.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I live for those, man, and yeah, it's I'm so lucky that I get to engage with the curators of those little moments that make my life better. And I had numerous instances of those with you, many in Death of Layla Starr. Like thinking back now, because I hunted down those. I got the foil covers for that,
Hmm.
that beautiful set. And then
Hmm.
they dropped the hardcover, and I had to buy it again, and I was fine with it. I was like, okay, it's worth it. But
Oh shucks.
dude, that was just a beautiful, like every panel was just insanely gorgeous. But that story, and we all know what reincarnation is, and we have these ideas of like the divine and religion, but yeah, how you played with that and universalized it and made it like easily consumable to a very wide Western audience too.
Mm.
Like I was like, that really impressed me, and that was just a great book. But you're doing that like in Gotham now, kind of like you're bringing this like heavy, dreamlike, like you mentioned the opera, it's very gothic too. Like
Hmm.
it's a very interesting tapestry you're playing with, and one of the things that interested me the most is you're bringing in this notion of like this new history of Gotham, right? That we weren't familiar with, and I won't lie, when I first started reading it, it reminded me of like Court of Owls a little bit, of this like
Hmm.
secret society, this hidden history of Gotham that we didn't know about, and I
Hmm.
was like, and I knew you, and I know, well, I mean, I knew your writing, I was familiar with your work, and so I was like, I was like, it's obviously not going to be a Court of Owls clone, right? But just that's like what I was like reminded of Snyder and the Court of Owls, and how like influential that made his Batman run later,
Right.
right? And to see you doing something very loosely similar, very much putting your own like vibe and voice into it, right? And just this like the mysticism, the danger, reminding us that like Bruce is old. He's older than a lot of us think he is, and he does not have powers, and he is not invincible, and money can buy you a lot, but it can't buy you like youth
Yeah.
and like muscle tissue, right? It can't.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so so I love that you're kind of like naturally aging and putting a new weight on Bruce Wayne, and in a time, and I guess a lot of people aren't allowed, or maybe like you're not allowed to do that at DC or whatnot, because it's like these are immortal characters, right? And like aging and like bodily fun. You're always youthful. You're always in vigilante mode, right? Is did you get any pushback of that when you're kind of like reminding the audience and Gotham and the citizens of Gotham, like, hey, Batman is old and he's slowing down, and he like maybe his edges are dulling, and like what does that mean for DC Comics? What does that mean for Gotham? What does that mean to comic readers? Was anybody like, whoa, dude, like Bat doesn't he doesn't get old? Like, did
I
they kind of
mean,
like wag a
the
finger at
the
you?
the only rule with Batman books, as far as I understand at DC,
Mm-hmm.
is that you can't show Batman sitting down.
Really?
That's the only rule, as far as I know. Everything else is open and okay. Um, but to go back to some of the things you were talking about, uh, part of this narrative, part of the story, the overarching theme of the narrative is that Batman goes through the same cycles over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, this is somebody who is famous for saving Gotham. But have you really saved it if, like, every 2 years there's another crisis and you have to? you know.
Yeah.
And I found that it's almost Sisyphean, right? Like you're rolling this stone uphill
Yeah.
perennially, and yet you're celebrated as someone who has done this job, who has saved it. No, there's still more, mountain to roll your stone up. um, and I found that fascinating as a backdrop to talk about a character who is getting weary more than he's getting old.
Mm.
And I find I find that to be interesting when we apply that to characters who've been around for like decades, 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah.
Um, because something has to change. Surely 50 years on, you're not still doing it because your parents were shot in an alleyway,
Mm-hmm.
Like you've been to the ends of the universe, you've beaten Darkseid, you've been inside your own mind, you've traveled through time. Are you still doing it because Thomas and Martha Wayne got shot in an alley?
Yeah.
And I find that question interesting to ask, right? And I think part of that is why when this run began, it did all of those familiar things. Oh, here's another villain who was from Gotham's past. Oh, here's another crisis that Gotham's gonna go through. Oh, here's another battle that it looks like Batman cannot solve. But what are we saying through that, right? And maybe potentially at the end of this run to give an answer that says, okay, well, Batman can change too. His motivations can change too. If Gotham keeps going through cycles of upheaval, then surely Batman's inner self goes through these cycles as well.
Mm.
And he renews himself each time he saves Gotham, each time he defeats a villain, or each time he overcomes his inner self, his inner weaknesses. He renews himself, he changes, he becomes something else. And so that is really the core of the narrative that we've been angling towards. And
Wow.
so this idea of an inner demon, of Barbatos,
Yeah.
who can potentially confer his powers upon Batman, but is that a darkness? Is that something that will come back to bite you in the end? Does
Mm.
Batman care about that? And so these are questions that we're angling towards, and so it makes complete sense to me that people were like, "Oh yeah, this is familiar. I've seen this before." I'm like, "Yes, but what does
But
that say?"
yeah, and like I said, like even though like it felt similar, it very
Yeah,
very quickly turned into like your own machinations, your like, and
yeah,
it felt very new. What you just said really impressed me because reading it. It often feels like degenerative in the element of like what is going on with Bruce, right? Bruce the man and Bruce the bat, like he's he's been falling and it's a hard fall, right? Like
yeah,
you didn't just throw him down a pit, like you threw him into like a scraggly, like endless, like bottomless despair that he's like bouncing off the walls like on his way down, right? I mean,
yeah.
you're not kind to Bruce Wayne. I don't think anyone should be.
Right.
I think great Batman stories come when we break him, right? When we break him and he picks himself back up. And always interesting to see how new creators
And also,
make him
like,
pick up.
I think the joy of doing this run is we've done that enough number of times for Batman to realize that's what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to spoil things coming up, but the idea is that question is very directly asked to Batman in the
Mm.
issues coming up. Like, if you must always win, are you not afraid
Yeah.
that at some point you can't win? You're too old. You're too. And I like that. Maybe I'll pull this off. Maybe this will come through. But on some level, Batman's response is, no, I don't have to always win. The key is that I always fail, and I still find a way to come back from it.
Oh
My
wow.
victory is not guaranteed. It's only guaranteed that I will fail and I will stand up again.
Wow. That's so cool. Now another cool thing about what you're doing. Well, two couple cool things. I love Barbatos and how you have taken a what could have been like a thought bubble, right? And you and your co-creators have taken this inner monologue and because of shenanigans and what's going on, like he's got Barbatos, he's got this demon in him, and then he's got the orgum, the the the
Yeah, the
the
asthma. Yeah,
entity, yeah, the
yeah,
asthma, and so he's got these like dueling kind of metaphysical supernatural entities within him,
yeah,
and then communicating with Barbatos too, and Barbatos is both asking him like those questions, those big questions, and kind of making Bruce ask those questions of himself, and then like
yeah.
dealing with his inner child and stuff, and like all this the words that you put on these scripts and the stellar art that DC's been like get like how the artists you've been getting to work with so far on Detective, whether it's like your phenomenal cover artists or like I mean you had Raphael for a second and you had Fernando, like you're getting like amazing art, and you guys are doing awesome stuff in Gotham, but then like your B stories, your White Noise Vault pals are like getting to like play around in
Yeah.
Gotham. And I know Dan and Cy had done stuff with DC before you, but
Yeah.
did you have any input on that, or was that just kind of serendipitous of like you and some of the
No,
Vault
no,
guys
these
getting?
are people that um I was comfortable collaborating with, because I think
Okay.
the B stories are also collaborative. Like they all tie into the main story. They
Mm-hmm.
all feed into the overall effect and the overall feel of reading a detective comics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I'd collaborate with them on a broader level, like in terms of like, cool, can we pick this character? Can
Mm-hmm.
this is what I need to establish in the B story for my main story. But beyond that, I'm happy for you to write whatever you want to write.
Okay.
And so I think part of the joy of working in comics is being able to collaborate with people like that.
Nice.
So yeah. So it kind of stemmed from my experience of doing the backup stories on the Justice League book, where
Mm.
I was doing Justice League Dark, but it didn't really have much connective tissue to Justice League stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I found that most people who speak about the book are people who want to complain for one reason or the other, right? So people who love the backup but don't like the main story will complain because they're like, "Oh, why am I paying so much for 10
Mm-hmm.
pages of a backup in a book?" And the people who love the main story but don't like the backup will complain, "Ah, why do I have to pay for extra 10 pages when I would be happy with the main story?"
Yeah.
Um, and so when we began this run, it was my proposal to the editor that it should never feel like we're reading two things. It should always feel like
Yes.
they're part of one whole. And to their credit, Dan, Cy, and now Alex have all done brilliant things with the backups, and it's always felt like it's one story rather than two things.
Nice. I forgot Alex. That's the more recently Alex
Yeah,
back
Alex
in, right?
is. I think Alex is going to be doing 1084, 85, and 86.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't got a chance to interview him yet, but we talk online. We've talked about doing an interview for like almost over a year.
Yeah.
Holidays, and he's overseas too, and then like he's got like the kids and stuff too. But yeah, like one of these days I'm gonna get him. But he's such good people, and very very cool to see all of you guys really like all of you guys like coming out from these doing really great indie stuff. I mentioned like all the work over at Vault that you guys did, because for me that's how I stumbled across a lot of you, right?
Mm.
Was I heard like
The vault
whispers of
stuff.
these
Yeah.
savage shores, and it was like everybody was like, you have to read this book, and then I did,
Mm.
and I was like, okay, this fucks, like let's party, and then I started reading like more what Vault was doing, and then got into
Yeah.
Psy, and then like Dan and all this crazy stuff, and then yeah, when I found out like you guys were all working on Detective together, I was just
Yeah.
like, that is so amazing, and I do agree that yeah, unfortunately it's not always the case, but yeah, like what you were saying about how the B stories should feel like anchored into what we just read and not something totally different.
Yeah.
But I mean, unfortunately, like sometimes it does, right? Or like, I mean, every now and then, sometimes they'll use it as like a jumping on point for a new miniseries or something. And like the stuff that you guys have done, like the glimpses of like Renee, and then like Two-Face
Hmm.
stuff was really cool, and then like like not on the job anymore, Gordon, and like very very awesome like little
Yeah, because it
moments.
feels like all of the characters have bigger lives outside of the
Yeah,
main story, and so the main story in itself feels a lot bigger than it is. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's a technique that's used in so many other mediums. I was surprised no one was doing it in this one. So,
and it is surprising. Now, before I move to your indie stuff, because I love your DC work, but you've got some awesome other books out right now that I'm very excited to talk about too. But do you know Chip is writing the regular Bat title, right?
yeah.
And he seems like an interesting person, right? He just seems very like.
What, Chip Zdarsky, an interesting person? Yeah, of course.
But I mean, do is there is there ever any like any kind of or is he kind of doing his own thing at Batman and you're kind of doing your own thing at Detective? I didn't, because Marvel does like the retreats sometimes and they bring everybody together, and then I don't I don't know if they like
I
pass
mean,
around drugs or what, but you guys get ideas and throw
he
around.
emailed me yesterday. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. That's cool. He did. Chip
uh,
Zdarsky did not email me yesterday. So.
cool. No, yeah, very early on when we started working on these books, we were in a Zoom call, which sadly for me has replaced most of these retreats.
Oh yeah.
Um, we were on a Zoom call, and you know, I had the option of whether we could tie in the two books,
Mm-hmm.
or if the two books were going to do their own thing. And this was like presented to me as an option. And they said, yeah, look, sometimes it's good for the book because it ties into the main Bat line. So everyone who's reading the Bat
Mm-hmm.
stuff comes in and reads the detective stuff. But also, yeah, they were like, also, it might be good for you to do your own thing on detective if that's the way you want to go. And it made sense to me because why would you want two books doing the same thing? They're
Mm-hmm.
both Bat books. They're both focused on Batman. So I said I want to do something that feels dramatically different from the main Batman book, because then, cumulatively, you've got readers who love both books, will read both books. Readers who prefer one book over the other are still going to find enough variety to have a book that they can read.
Mm.
Whereas if everything takes on the aesthetic of one sort of flagship title titular book, the only people reading are people who enjoy that aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it just made sense to me to do like a dramatically different Bat book, which maybe sat adjacent to what was happening in the main Batman book, but didn't really have to tie in or cross over.
Okay.
Um, but we also didn't want to end up being like, cool, I'm using the same villain you're using, but it's completely different stories. So
Mm-hmm.
on stuff like that, we coordinate.
Okay.
We're like, okay, hey, I'm using this guy. I'm going to be doing this over the next couple of hours, just making sure I'm not stepping on your toes. So it's stuff like that, and Chip does the same. So we email each other, we talk to each other about these things.
Nice.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's all pretty coordinated and cordial.
Well, that's good. That's because I feel like you're having a good time at DC, and I very much want you to stay there and keep playing around. What is, because I mean, like I
Yeah, I
mentioned,
mean, I'm on an
Catwoman.
exclusive with them now, so I
You
will
are
I
okay.
will I will certainly be here for the
That's
foreseeable.
okay. That's
Yeah.
good. I didn't know if you were contracted with them or I mean there's always some kind of contract, right, but like an exclusive, so you can obviously do like indie stuff, right, but you're not like
Yeah, I can't
no
do.
Venom anymore at the
Yeah,
time,
no,
like.
no IP work for
Okay.
other
Okay.
publishers, but I can still do, yeah, my independent stuff. Yeah,
Is it challenging when you're on a bigger book like this? And then I know it wasn't what, a year. Is your kiddo even a year old yet? Your baby? Like,
my kid's 2.5 now,
oh, two. Okay,
so
wow, time
yeah,
flies. But it's still okay. Still a tiny human to raise and take care of, though, which is still hard. Like that's a lot of work. big DC property, and then you've got okay, you got Dawnrunner coming. You got One Hand that came out this week, and you got Rare Flavors right at Boom. So you got some big indie work going too.
And I wrote for a video game, and I did 2 scripts for animation.
Oh wow! How do you like? Do you have any like tips or tricks or what works for you on like
I
on
have I
balancing
have
life and
one
work?
tip: don't do it. um, no,
Wait,
I
don't do what? Don't work in
don't.
comics. Don't have kids. Don't. Which,
No, don't do all of them at the same
okay,
time.
okay,
Um,
stagger it.
yeah, no, I was. I keep saying this everywhere, and Aditya Bidikar, who's my letterer on most of my
Mm-hmm.
books, and a lovely person and a good friend, was like, you've been saying you're trying to cut down on work for 3 years now. Um, and frankly, it has been a case of that. I keep trying to cut down on work, um, but there's also like that. There's one part of me that's like a grown-up 42-year-old with a kid, with a job, with a house, mortgage payments, bills, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another part of me that's like a 10-year-old with comics. And whenever someone comes up and they're like, hey, would you like to work on this comic? The 42-year-old in me goes like, Ram, you can't do that. You don't have time to work on this comic. The 10-year-old in me goes ahead and signs the contract.
Well, I mean,
So
sometimes you can't say no, right? Or I mean, you could, but it'd be like,
you
you
can
know,
always say no. In fact, everyone I've spoken to in comics, people I respect, people who've been around for a while,
yeah.
um, you know, people like Jonathan Hickman, Kieran Gillen, I talk to them and they're like, you can always say no. It's good to say no. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's to their credit. That's a maturity you get when you've done
Mm.
this for a while and you've figured your shit out. And clearly in terms of the work-life balance stuff, like I haven't figured my shit out and I really should. But I think over the past couple of years, I've started becoming a little bit better about it. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, you're seeing all of these books come out, but that's largely work that I've already finished,
Yeah.
already done.
You've been
Um,
comics take a while.
yeah, yeah,
But it is cool to see you just like like I don't know, like fans of Rom are we're eating good right now, right? It's just like there's
well
stuff out
fed.
almost every week. Like it's just it's great. And
Yeah,
like
but you know what that means is like maybe in a couple of years from now, I'm gonna hopefully I'm gonna sort of cut that down to maybe doing 2 projects at a time rather
okay.
than doing 4 of them at a time,
Mm.
because I have ambitions and creative things to do outside of comics as well. Recent years I've been doing some, like I said, I've been doing some animation stuff, some game stuff. I will be doing some film and TV stuff, adapting some of my own creator-owned work
Ooh.
as well. And these are all things that I wanted to do when I started off. I started off writing prose, so that's definitely something I want to get back to as well.
Okay.
And right now, like between writing all of these comics and just like breathing, I don't have room. So hopefully, over the next couple of years, the fact that I've been saying no for the past, year or so will actually, bear fruit. And
Mm.
I've also learned to be like, I will say yes to this because it's great, but I can't start on it for at least another year.
Okay.
And that stuff works out as well. So yeah,
I like that. You just tell you're like you can have me, but you got to wait for me. I like all of us I wish could get to that level one day, right? Like, all right, you
yeah.
can hire me, but you got to wait for it. Like you got to get in line, DC. Like that would just be
I
great to
mean,
be.
but
I
I
kid,
mean,
I kid.
it is also the truth, and I
Yeah.
think it's better for any publisher to know that,
Mm-hmm.
um, rather than say yes to something, start off half baked, and
Mm-hmm.
then the whole project falls apart because you're kind of juggling too many things
Yeah,
at the same
like why
time, you
can't
know?
anyone keep deadlines and what's
Yeah.
exactly like honesty is a great policy in any kind of
Yeah,
production. Like
and hopefully the quality of my work is allows me to be able to have that room to say, hey, I'd love to do this, but I can't start at it for at least another 6 months or another
yeah,
year. And yeah, if the work wasn't any good, then I assume publishers would be like, no, thanks, we'll look somewhere else. And
yeah,
sometimes they still say that,
hmm
and that's okay. So yeah, I think it's a mature, natural consequence of being somebody who does hopefully good work,
hmm
but also being someone who's honest enough and professional enough to know what their limits are.
yeah. No, that's knowing your limits is a huge strength, and but also like also just congratulations to you for like being at that moment in your career because it takes people a while to get there and when not only when you can like start saying no to stuff but when you can be a little more picky, right? And you can maybe pick work that you're a little bit more passionate about or something, or you know, like wait for that big project that you've been thirsty for or something, you know, and like and some people don't get that opportunity or don't realize they have the opportunity when they could, you know, like some people like if I say
Yeah, I
no
mean,
they'll stop asking or you know like I
yeah,
used to think
yeah. To
that
be
so
honest, I feel like it's more the second case than the first.
oh yeah
Um, yeah, because look, when publishers approach you for projects, they're doing it because clearly you have some ability. You have
mm-hmm
something they want that they don't already have, right?
mm-hmm
Otherwise, why would you reach out to someone who isn't already working on one of your things, right?
yeah
Um, and so when they do that, this whole idea of saying yes out of desperation, saying yes out of a need to fill a schedule, you can work that way, but unfortunately, what that means is you're reducing your own creative desires to my only desire is to be always working between 9 and 5, which isn't a very creative way to
no
approach your work, you
that's
know?
I don't feel like that's a good way to I feel like that's a way that a lot of people think that we are supposed to live life that's maybe not exactly the case, right? You know, like
Yeah, yeah, and maybe I have this perspective because I did that kind of a job. I was a chemical engineer for about 6.5 years
oh
before.
really I didn't know that.
Yeah, I studied
That's
chemical
why you're so
engineering.
smart. That's an intelligent man's job. Like that's
Ah, writers, the clearly not smart part
okay.
of.
That's not what I meant.
um, no, so I worked in a sort of heavy industries job. I
Okay.
worked in paper mills, in power plants. I worked in
Oh.
inhospitable conditions. I worked in front of 98-degree furnaces with chemical fumes rising from the slurry that you were walking through. So, having done all of that, when I switched to writing, it was clearly with a desire to be creatively fulfilled rather
Yeah.
than because if I just wanted to, work 9 to 5, work hard at a job and get paid to do that, I could have just continued the chemical engineering stuff, right?
Yeah.
So why did I switch to writing? I switched to writing because I wanted to be excited by whatever I was doing. And as long as you stay true to that desire, maybe you say yes to every project that comes in because you're excited to write every project.
Mm-hmm.
But there will come a time where you're like, I'm doing so much that the joy of me working on a project is being stifled by the fact that I'm constantly worried about the next deadline.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a pity. That's a pity to get to that point. So, yeah, even if you're staggering a paycheck, even if it's a difficult choice to make, if you can afford to, then always I would say take time to read, take time
Mm-hmm.
to live your life outside of writing other people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. You heard it here, folks. Rom is telling us all that we're working too hard and we need to take it. He's like, but I joke, but I do think that. So
No,
like I
but
started doing
people who
PR.
don't have to do that are super lucky and
Yeah. Yeah.
don't realize it. And I think we live in a society where you're constantly encouraged to think of everything of value in terms of like how much time did I put in? What am I
Mm-hmm.
getting paid for it? How much money am I making? from it.
Yeah.
And there's no value you can put on like, cool, I walked around London today and I watched someone eat a sandwich and I overheard a conversation someone had with someone else about their life, and I will put all of that into my writing, but I will never get to do it if I don't allow myself the time to just be like, cool, I'm just going to walk around today, I'm just going to
Yeah.
observe people today, I'm going to observe life. And there's no value to that, right? I can't be like, cool, I spent yesterday doing quote unquote research and
Yeah.
therefore it will pay me so much.
Yeah.
I think we need to get out of, I'm not saying don't work hard, I'm saying work hard. I work very hard. I
Yeah.
work till 4 a.m. in the morning when I have to write my scripts, but um, work to do things that make you happy
Mm.
rather than working towards some sort of fictional numerical goal and being very unhappy and dissatisfied
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah. Okay. That definitely. So like I quit my job last year. I had a shitty office job. And I kind of felt stuck and I was good at it. But I quit and then I started doing like PR, some like
Mm.
comic PR, and I work with like some Kickstarter creators and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then I got a job at like a production studio, and so anyway I started working in comics. But I recently got to a point where I had to a couple people reached out to me and like, hey, we want to hire you, and I was like, guys, I'm sorry, I can't take any more clients on right now. And
Right.
it was a cool moment, but it was like very scary because I in my mind, I'm like, dude, you're still new at this, like don't sleep, figure out how to take extra clients, right? Like I was like, you can't, like you haven't been doing this long enough to say no yet. But then like the other part of me that like I very much care about my clients and the work I'm doing was like, no, like if you stretch yourself too thin, you're not going to do a good job for anybody,
Yeah.
and so like that was a new thing
Yeah, and then
that I had to deal with.
you only got here because you do that quality
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
And so if that falls by the wayside, then you can say yes to 10 things now and then guarantee that it'll all dry up because the quality isn't
Yeah.
there.
No one's going to be referring you later or
Yeah.
calling back later. Yeah. So that, but so I very much agree. I'm glad that you're able to do that. Right. Like if it's a day of research of like, maybe going off location and writing or people watching or, like whatever you got to keep doing, man, to keep these stories flowing. Like I'll tell me what I got to do if I got to get out there and fight for you, dude. Like we have to protect Rom at all costs, folks. We got to keep him on these
No, I
books.
think I think part of the reason I did the DC exclusive was for that.
Okay.
Because I went to them and I said, "Hey, I've got these projects that I feel quite passionately about, and some of them are big things,
Mm-hmm.
big commercial things that you'll want. But then I also want to do these little weird side projects that I've wanted to do, but I want to do them because they excite me, because they make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and DC were happy to do that. So it's not like there are these kind of
Nice.
big corporate pressures that make you say yes to everything. Yeah, DC were happy to do that. They were like, look, as long as you're passionate about a project, and as long as you're willing to pitch it, and we're willing to go through the
Mm.
process of approving it, yeah, let's do it. So
Nice.
yeah, a lot of my upcoming DC work is stuff that I went to them with, and I said, this is what
Cool.
I want to do. And the same with my indie stuff. I'm only working on things that I want to do. I'm not really doing a lot of work on properties where people are like, you know, you've got a turtles cap on. I'm not really doing like turtles, or I'm not
Yeah.
doing comics that I didn't create from
Mm-hmm.
scratch. So yeah.
Though I would say I'm excited for Jason Aaron's Ninja Turtles, but if they were like Rom's writing Ninja Turtles the new arc, I would be really intrigued. Like I would be intrigued as to
don't
like
get
how
me
you would
don't
write
get
the
me
prose.
wrong. All of these properties are things that I have takes on, and
Nice.
and I would be excited to do at some point in
Yeah.
time. But right now, I'm focusing on me.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I'm glad because like
like I'll tell
one
you a
hand.
funny I'll tell you a funny story.
Oh, let's go. Let's get it.
Back when IDW was publishing GI Joe,
Yeah.
Um, I was just starting out in comics, and I walked up to their GI Joe editor at one of the conventions, and I went, "Hey, I'm new to comics." Showed him my indie work. I had Paradiso published by then,
Ooh.
and then so we started a conversation. Then started doing some DC work, and so the profile was certainly becoming more evident and apparent to other publishers. They were like, "Hey, yeah, you came to me that one time and you said you had a project. Like, what project did you want to pitch?" And I went so full bore with like, "This is exactly what I want to do. This is the book. This is how I want to do it. It has to be this format. It has to be this style of art." And at the end of it, they were like, "I'm so shocked. I did not expect you to have a fully prepared GI Joe pitch. Like that was not on my bingo card. Rom V has a fully prepared GI Joe pitch that he." Um, and then just I think a few months ago, I was talking to Josh Williamson, who's a good friend,
Hmm.
who's now working on the GI Joe stuff for
Yeah.
Skybound. Um, I was just talking to him. I told him this story, and he was like, "Can I see the pitch?" So I sent it to him. Yeah, and look, like I grew up on Turtles. I watched the animated show every day. It would come
Hmm.
up during the after school hours in India. So I grew up on the Turtles, and obviously I have takes on all of these projects. But right now,
Yeah.
focusing on stuff that I'm working on. Yeah.
Well, that's good because I really really liked One Hand that came out.
Oh,
Which
cool. Yeah,
that
yeah.
it came
I'm
out
glad.
came out. Wait, is it come out? Is it this? It came out last week. Came out
Came
last
out
week,
last
right?
week.
Okay.
Yeah, and then next
Um,
week is going to be Six
this week's
Fingers.
Dan.
Yeah,
Oh wait, next week or
next
this
week
week?
is next week is
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
So
is it this week or next week?
I don't. I got. Hold on.
It,
I had it pulled up. Let's see. The Six Fingers. Oh, the 21st. Yeah. So
yeah,
next
yeah,
week.
next week. Okay,
Okay.
good.
So you said you were working on the last chapter. There's how many books for each side of this are we getting?
So it's going to be 5 issues of
5 and 5.
each.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's always going to be the release schedule is always going to be one of mine, one of Dad's, two of mine, two of Dad's,
Okay.
three of mine.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's exciting. Now, so again, like this, you and Dan have known each other for a while, and very familiar with each other's work.
hmm
Uh, how did this idea come to be? So be- before you answer that though, I want to say I know I compared you like I know I compared your Bat Run to Snyder initially, and I'm
yeah,
about to do it again, but not to Snyder. Like this feels like Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips for just a moment until
sure,
until your weird shit kicks in, and then
sure.
it goes to a whole nother level. And like I was just so first like when it was just like real gritty noir, like I was like I love that, and I was feeling it. But then like this when the old case the hand case returns, right, and
Yeah,
we kind of start learning about that, learning about Ari, learning about what's going on. And then he's about to retire, and I love that
mhm.
line too. They were like, "You just licked the icing off your fork," or whatever, and he's like,
Yeah. You just
"Put
ate
me
the
back on
frosting.
it." And so like, but it's very weird and very creepy. The art, the who is that?
Lawrence Campbell. Yeah,
Yeah, like oh man, it's really creepy art. And the colors are very like dark and moody and just adding to that like noir grit. And so there was a moment when the detectives with a woman of the night, right? He's with
yeah,
a sex worker,
yeah.
and there's I don't want to spoil it but there's a weird thing happens in that scene,
Oh
and
no, a
then
weird sex thing.
yeah, weird. I mean, it was
It
technically
wasn't. It
it was
wasn't.
after
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sex, I think, but there's this really intense moment, and then it kind of spawns out into the rest of the brothel, which then kind of like spreads out into this whole world of the narrative, right? Like where we
yeah,
that really like cemented this part where it was like, oh, we're like I'm in a different era, I'm in a
yeah,
different time, like there's what I know about this genre of fiction may not necessarily apply, right? And you
yeah,
very cleverly put that in, and that key moment for me was in that brothel, and that was just a really cool, and it like happens when like the lightning strikes. It's what a cool issue, dude. Like it's like the structure, pacing, like you're a seasoned creator and you collaborate with insane talent. And so I just, if this is how this is starting, and then whatever Dan's going to bring to the table next, and we got like a little 4-page preview of Dan's at the end of
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay. And I'm so excited about it. And this feels like, I was trying to think, like, I can't think of any kind of dual narrative from like two different creators and two different series happening alongside each other where one's like a cop and robber scenario, right? But it's like a cop and serial killer,
Yeah.
or a detective serial killer. And I was like, the way you guys are putting it out there is very fresh. And where like what put this idea, like, because I feel like you could have collaborated, right, and had like maybe even an A and B story, or
Yeah.
one title that had flashbacks and jump cuts or whatever. But
Mhm.
you guys were, like, no, I'm gonna write this side, you're gonna write this side. They're gonna be interwoven narratives, and so like you put some extra work and pressure on yourselves. I think that extra work and pressure is going to pay off, right? But
Yeah.
what made you guys want to do this in the midst of, like, both of you have a lot of stuff going on, so it's like like now's the time for this huge project.
I mean, this is the stuff that you get into it for, like,
Nice.
uh, yeah, it's great to do the big sort of superhero stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but as a superhero fan, it's exciting to do that. But as someone who loves writing, you want to do things that
Mm-hmm.
push you in weird places and weird ways, and you're like, oh, how do I solve this problem? How do I create a story that feels new and yet doesn't alienate people, and
Yeah.
doesn't feel unfamiliar? Um, and so if you look at my past work, all of my work has done this
Mm-hmm.
this very particular thing where I take a genre that the moment you start reading, you're like, I know exactly what this is. And then about 10 pages in, you're like, I have no idea what this is. Um, and I think that's such a great feeling. Like, I enjoy stuff that does that to me as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, but if you look at, D Savage Shores, oh, I know this is vampires. Like, wait, it's
Yeah.
colonialism. Wait, what? And so if you look at Black Mamba, which is the thing I did before, it was a Kickstarter project I
Yeah.
did.
I have
It
a copy of
was,
that here with your artwork in it,
oh yeah,
actually.
great.
Yeah.
So that's like crime noir set in Mumbai.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many people notice. Like, none of the stories have any actual crime in them. Like, there is literally no crime in a crime noir book. Um, so I've always been someone who enjoyed doing that. And so the one hand is very much a gritty sort of pulp American crime noir story that will end up being a sci-fi philosophical quandary by the time you're finished with it.
Nice.
Um, and I think you start seeing bits and pieces of that, and like any good noir story, things that seem innocuous at first start getting deeper and
Mm-hmm.
weirder and grittier and harder as things go on. And so I think you'll start seeing that in these issues. So that's where oh yeah, this is Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Of course it is, because I love those guys. I've read every Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips book. But this is also Denis Villeneuve doing sci-fi. This is also Alex Garland doing Ex Machina,
Mm.
and I think that's where the shift comes in, because I love taking two things that don't immediately fit together and go, like, I can tell a story that pulls both these things together in a meaningful, impactful way, right?
Wow.
Um, so that's kind of where my brain's usually at. The reason this project happened very specifically is because I had just finished reading Cormac McCarthy's Sunset Limited.
Okay.
And I think within a matter of days or weeks, I had I'd listened to a podcast that Dan Waters had recommended to me, um, about post-work societies, about how one day machine singularity will happen and machines will make more machines and therefore they will do all the work,
Mhm.
and human beings will be left only to pursue leisure or higher callings, if you will, rather than have to, work hard slaving in front of some machine that you don't give a shit about. Um, and I found reading those two things immediately after each other quite interesting, because Sunset Limited draws a conclusion that applies directly to the idea of post work societies that none of the post work society people seem to have drawn, which is fantastic to recognize. And so I had this revelation happen in my head at some 3 a.m. in the morning. And I immediately messaged Dan because he had recommended the podcast to me, but also because I knew this had to be these kind of. So, for those who haven't read Sunset Limited is a conversation between two people. It's a play, but it's also written like a novel. And it's literally the entire thing is just a conversation between two people. So, it's quite dialectical. And so, my brain just went, what better way to execute that sort of hard coded background into the story than quite literally have two books that are arguing against each other?
Mm.
Um, and so then applying the detective format to it went, okay, cool. One book is a detective and the other book is allegedly the killer.
Okay.
And so let's have those two books tell the same story. And in reading those two stories, you understand their argument. And in understanding their argument, perhaps you understand a truth that is not evident to either book.
Wow.
Um, And so when I had that idea, I messaged Dan at 3 a.m. in the morning. He was up. He took my call. We talked about it. And also, I think the cool part that a lot of people don't realize is because I brought him into the project so early on, I didn't have a story written and he didn't have a story written. I
Okay.
knew I wanted to do the detective side of it, but I went like, Dan, you should do the killer side of it. And I don't want to know beforehand what you're going to do. I don't want to tell you what to do with the killer side of it either.
Oh
So,
no, that's crazy.
so it's just quite literally like I write an issue, about halfway through my writing the issue, he sees it and he starts writing his issue. And about by the time I'm finished with mine, he's halfway through his, and I start reading that. And in reaction, whatever needs to happen in my second issue needs to react or reflect to that, if you
Whoa.
will.
So a
Um,
lot of this is like on the fly, like you guys are experiencing each
about half of
other's.
the story is on the fly
Whoa.
because it is necessarily reacting to
And I
the
say on
stuff
the
that
fly, like you guys
yeah,
are obviously drafting and editing
yes,
after the
yes,
initial moments, but that initial like
yeah, but
reaction plot
yeah,
development is very fresh as this.
yes.
Oh, that's so. Is that sounds very very exciting, and that also sounds like borderline terrifying. Like, is it like a fun mixture like this new project,
I mean,
or do you just
it's
do you trust Dan enough and you're like
well,
there's
I
nothing to
trust
be
Dan
scared
enough,
of?
but also like I trust stories enough. Like
Okay.
the interesting thing is because like stories are not entities that live distinctly from human personality and endeavor and behavior. Like things are only stories because human beings recognize them as stories, right?
Yeah.
Like if five random things happened and I wrote them down on a piece of paper, it wouldn't mean anything to you unless those five random things had some kind of inner pattern that you were willing to recognize as a reader, right?
Okay.
Um, and so the human tendency is to want to make patterns in stories. And as a writer, that's really what you're taking advantage of when you go like, oh, if I put these two things next to each other, they may be completely unrelated, but a reader will make sense of it. Um, and that's kind of where stories live. That's also where comics live because technically that's what a gutter is. Every time you put two panels
Mm-hmm.
next to each other, that's not like someone hitting the ball and the ball flying off, right? It doesn't have a cause and effect. There are
Mm-hmm.
two panels, someone's crying, and then the next panel is someone on a stage accepting an award. There's a story there. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Were they a couple? Did one person's career get left behind and the other person is winning all the awards now? Or is this a partner who's been sacrificed in the pursuit of fame? So you see, like, two unrelated panels have story between them
Yeah.
depending on what you're willing to put there. Um, and this is also an effect that's used in film. It's called the Kuleshov effect, where, like, if I show you a bowl of soup, then I show you Ryan Gosling's face, you're gonna go, "Oh, Ryan Gosling is hungry and is considering having soup."
Okay.
If I show you a baby in a crib and I show you the same Ryan Gosling face, you're gonna go, "Oh, that's Ryan Gosling's kid and he's looking over his kid in the crib." You're creating story.
Uh-huh.
The images are often random, right?
Okay.
And so because it does that, it becomes it when you're writing it, it's a lot easier than it seems on the outside, because you know people will want to make patterns. Then you can decide, okay, cool, if you give me this A image, I can put this unrelated B image next to it, but people will bridge that gap because they want to read stories, they want to understand it as a story.
Dude, that's you're blowing my mind, dude. This is amazing. That this is like this is feels like a really cool grad school lecture that I should have had, but with all the money I paid, but
I
I didn't
mean,
get one.
when the one hand came out, like Scott Snyder posted about it on his newsletter as an example of how you can do a cold open, something that doesn't really
Oh,
feel it,
cool.
right? And I love that he
That's got
just
to feel pretty good too. Like
yeah, no, and Scott's been like super complimentary about my work before as
nice.
well, like just yeah,
He
just
seems like a
really
good dude.
cool
Like yeah.
to have someone who's created so much be like,
Hmm.
hey, I love your work, yeah. But my point being, like, if you analyze the opening of the one hand, there's narration and images there that make no sense if you put them next to each other, but they work
Yeah.
because you will make sense of them. Like, there's a part where he's talking about him being a kid and having to enroll in the academy because his
Hmm.
father found him smoking cigarettes by some neighbor's house, you know. But actually, when he's narrating that, the thing you're seeing is him walking up to the crime scene, and a police guy letting him in through the police line, and as he walks up the stairs, like the visual has no relation to the narration,
Mm.
but it works
Yeah.
because your brain will make that relationship because they're next to each other.
Wow. So even though like this seems almost like experimental and new what you and Dan are doing with this, what you guys are actually doing is you're going back to like the the base origins of storytelling. Like you mentioned, is like the human the human response is to take these two and different things and put connections to them, right? And
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of how
mean,
you guys are treating this narrative.
yes, but it's not like that's groundbreaking in any way, because we've seen it before. We've seen Kurosawa do it with Rashomon.
Mm,
We've seen, I think, Ridley Scott do it with the Last Duel,
okay.
and we've seen Clint Eastwood do it with Letters from Flags of Our Fathers and Letters
Mm,
from Iwo Jima.
mm-hmm.
Um, so this kind of two narratives, and creating them and having them sit next to each other and having your viewers find a third truth that exists between, has been done before, just not in comics.
I got
Uh,
okay.
considering, which is astounding, considering comics is the medium of juxtaposition. Everything in comics is about what you put next to something else.
Yeah, that is funny. And I don't even know if you guys have thought this far ahead yet, but like when this gets released in like collections, are they going to be separate
No, it'll
collections or
be
will they
going
be
to be
put
one
together?
collection, and it will be issue one, issue one, issue two, issue two, issue three,
Oh,
issue.
cool.
Yeah,
Oh, that's exciting. That's exciting. I was hoping it would, because one of my favorite things in this world is Image hardcovers. They just
yeah,
do it right every single time.
yeah,
And so, and usually when the bigger creators have it usually gets a hardcover. So I was hoping, but I also didn't know. But that's cool. I like the idea of keeping them together and
yeah.
experience. I like the idea of experiencing it as it's released, right? Because
Yeah,
you
because
mentioned
it's
like,
making use of that format, right?
and making
So
use of the week in between
yeah,
releases, right?
yeah.
You have like even more time to like let these things settle and kind
Because
of
you're
mess
gonna
with
make
you.
up your minds about certain things. You're gonna assume this is the truth,
Hmm.
and then you're gonna read Dan's issue and go like, wait a minute, no, this is the truth. And then you're gonna read my issue too and go, wait a minute, somebody else was lying. This is the truth.
I'm very excited. I don't want to call you like a master manipulator, because I don't know. I don't. That's not often a compliment, but like great writers and great artists, like one of your jobs, right, is to manipulate us, is to take your audience and like make us feel and experience things. I guess like part of it is you guide us, right? You hope we feel certain things, but
No,
you
I
can't
don't.
guarantee it.
I disagree. I disagree with that characterization because manipulation assumes that you're thinking of your end effect on the reader when you
Oh,
create something, right? Like you're thinking of your reader when you write, because that is manipulation, because you're trying to like second guess what. Every time I write, I'm trying to go like, what's Blake gonna react to? Okay, I'm
okay,
gonna put that. That's manipulative, and I don't
okay.
think good writing works that way. I think good writing works because it's exciting to me. I'm
Oh,
looking at this going, oh yeah, how do I solve this puzzle of telling a story by putting things next to each other that don't necessarily all follow linearly, that follow this kind of parallel narrative? How do I create a third narrative that sits between two things? And the beauty of storytelling, and this is going back to the fundamentals of storytelling, beauty of storytelling is that if something works for you, and if you are a person who has a good empathetic insight into what it's like to be a human being,
hmm.
then chances are it will work for other human beings.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think it was Dan who described the act of storytelling as in a very simple and wonderful way. Good storytelling is, this is what it reads like, it feels like to me as a writer. And then when I send that book to you, when it's published, when you read it, I'm really asking you the question like, does it feel the same to you? Question
Oh,
mark, right? And so that's not manipulative. That's more sharing. That's more
yeah.
empathetic. That's
That's
more
like a
collaborative.
collaborative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think collaborative is probably the closest word that comes to describing good creator reader
Oh,
relationship
wow.
in a story. And I think it's also why good games work, if you think about it. Like every game is a collaboration between the person playing the game, the person making the game,
Yeah.
because there's this tacit agreement and understanding that, because it always feels bad when you realize that, oh, someone's trying to manipulate me by presenting me with these choices.
Hmm.
Whereas when you play a game and you're like, oh, I made these choices by my own volition, of my own volition, and the game rewarded me or punished me or gave me a feeling because I made these choices. That's much more collaborative than manipulative, I would say.
Yeah. No, yeah. Wow. I'm like, I'm gonna be thinking about this conversation for a while. That's awesome. Like, yeah, I'm in agreement. But yeah, for the longest time, like I thought about it as a almost like a play of domination. How like the writer has to control, like in controlling the narrative, has to control or tries to control what the
But it's
audience.
impossible. You
Yeah.
realize, like, it's impossible to
Yeah.
control what the audience thinks.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can control is the art itself, is the work
Okay.
itself, right? So yes, you're a control freak in that you want to control what you put out, but it's still only about you when you put it
Okay.
out. It only becomes a collaboration, only becomes about readers once it's out of your hands and you can do nothing about it.
Wow. Oh, that's crazy. That's so cool. Oh my god. Okay. All right. Well, on that note, I do want to bring in. I had a really good time collaborating with you, Ram, on Dawnrunner because it
Yeah,
was so good. Okay, so I am like after school Cartoon Network, Gundam Wing. That's what my friends and I grew up on. Like
yeah,
giant monsters, giant robots, like Pacific Rim, like all this. Like I love it forever. And you have this new. The other, it was funny. This had obviously been in production because, as we mentioned, like comics are slow. Things
yeah.
they takes things a while from like
This one,
script to.
this one in particular.
But I had mentioned, I was like, man, I was like, I wish there were more mech comics. I
Mm,
mean, even in manga, which the last 2 years I've gotten a lot more into. But I mean, even like a lot of manga is like Gundam and then like Neon Genesis, like and even the long running Neon Genesis Evangelion manga are more the kids in school, right? So
mm.
there's this like I want more giant robots. And we're kind of, like now with like we always have it with like Transformers, right? But there's something different in traditional mech narratives. I think it's like the human pilot aspect of it all, right? And
Sure.
like we kind of lose that with Transformers. But anyway, like this Dawn Runner, it reminds me, like I feel like the tendrils of Neon Genesis, like especially with like how like when they get in the pods and there's like the fluids and the wires come out and
Yeah,
there's like that very intense visceral interconnectivity between
yeah.
man and or being and machine, right? And I thought that was really cool. The big twist at the end I don't want to talk about yet, but like the element that you're going to show us about what this does to the psyche, and like even how we view our own like identity and how
Mm,
like some of that gets broken and jumbled and stuff. Very, very cool. But you know even in when comics I think needs more of this, right? When we need more mecha, we need big robots,
hmm.
we need these like mechanical saviors, right? Packnadell did it with
With
Giga a while
Giga,
back,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
um and like I remember reading that and I had the same thought, like I wish I had more comics like this. And now you're doing it, and even though there's not a lot of mech comics, there's a lot of mech in media that we have
Mm,
consumed. And so, you know, when you have to think of ways to make your narrative stand out amidst like not only what's on the shelf at the same time of release, but like what came out before, or like thinking about marketability or whatever, which is gross. I don't like to talk, but you gotta think about it sometimes, right? But what what was that struggle like with this? With, I mean, the art makes it stand out because it's in one of the most one of the more beautiful issues I think I've read in the last couple months of
yeah.
Dawn Runner #1. But what were you kind of struggling with to like, you know, what do you have to say about like the mixture of like, biology and mechanics and that relationship and technology and the way it advances and what that does to the world and humanity. And I mean, like, were some of these like big themes, like was that some of the stuff you wanted to play with, or is it gonna are you more focused on like the intimate nature, like pilot to machine? Like there's a lot of avenues you could explore after this first issue. I'm very
Yeah, I mean, I
curious where
think
you go.
again to go back to that theme of like, yeah, I take familiar genres and then I try to do something with them that I don't think has been done or
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen done. And so it's a similar endeavor here. Like, yeah, I've taken the mecha kaiju genre. There's clearly influence from Neon Genesis. There's clearly influence from manga. There's clearly influence from, pretty much every big mech thing that you could think of, like
Mm-hmm.
Pacific Rim, even. Um, but I've always seen it. I've always seen that explore the idea of like, what's the relationship between machine and man, or like, what does it do to societies? Yeah, but I've never seen it do that twist at the end that you talked about. I've never seen that angle played out where um, the machine is genuinely an armor, and
Mm-hmm.
in this case, an armor that two people are wearing at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, very,
Um,
very, very trippy, very, very cool. Like again, you have a really those first issues are hard. I don't think a lot of people realize how hard like a first issue is. Like because it's you even if it's an indie book, you may get a few
second
extra
issues are the
pages.
worst.
Oh, I
First,
love you even more now because I said that. I was like, I've told people the other day. I was like, I've been thinking of not reviewing number like or focusing more on the on number twos, right? Of
yeah.
like because there's a lot of number ones where you're like, this was intriguing. I don't
See,
know
number
yet.
ones are easy to my mind.
Really?
Yeah, because everyone wants to be excited about a number one. When you pick
Oh,
up something, your brain's like your brain's like firing at 100 kilometers an hour. You're like, I want to pick up everything that's happening in this book.
yeah.
By the time you get to the end of issue one, you're like, all right, that was great. You will never reach that level of hype for issue two now.
Oh,
And
okay.
so when issue two comes, the challenge is to present you with a complication of issue one that makes your long-term neurons go like, oh, this is going to develop into something that I'm going to be excited about reading,
Wow.
rather than that immediate payoff of like cool stuff happening on the page in front of you.
Okay.
Because you can't keep that up. You can't. Okay, maybe issue two is also cool shit happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that for issue three. You can't do that for issue four. Otherwise, you're just doing a series of issue ones, and there's never the sense of development,
Yeah.
right? So the real challenge is when all the excitement is gone, the spark is gone, but you still have to keep the relationship going. So, so I feel like issue two's the middle of a book is often the hardest part.
Okay.
But issue two particularly because you really have to present an engaging reason for someone to say they're not making the choice of whether they're going to pick up the next issue at that point, right?
Okay.
You read issue one, and the choice you made was I'm going to pick up the next issue. But the next issue, the choice you're going to make is do I stick with this book or not?
Okay.
And that has to give you entirely different reasons
Yeah.
to follow on. So
Yeah. It's got it because yeah, like you can't. I think that's why a lot of people are getting burned out on like superhero movies and stuff right now is like I think we're kind of burned out on the spectacle, which is also funny because then I feel like when we have big action hero movies where they remind us that they're human, they don't like that either. But I also sometimes think nerds just are never happy, and that's fine too, as long as they keep buying books.
yeah,
So
I mean you're looking at it from the reader's perspective,
yeah, yeah,
but there's a if you really analyze, there's a reason why the initial slate all the way up to Endgame really worked, and then everything post that struggles to kind of replicate or
mm,
recapture that lightning in a bottle.
yeah,
And that goes back to exactly what I said about you can't keep doing a series of number ones.
mm-hmm,
Once you did Endgame, that's it. That was the story. It was
yeah,
finished. If you did anything after that, you couldn't then say, I'm going back and recapturing the beginning of this. You had to do the beginning of something else
mm-hmm.
entirely. Um, so yeah, I have opinions on stories, as you might expect.
Well, again, I know I've kept you over an hour, Rom, and this was so phenomenal. And again, I cannot. I can't recommend both Six Fingers in One Hand. Like everybody needs to put that. You can pre-order those right now. Anybody listening to this, One Hand's out. The first issue's out right now, and then by the time this comes out a week later, you should be able to get the Dan's Six Fingers #1. So you really need to get those on your list. And then what Dawnrunner comes out March 20th, and that's you got to pre-order this book, folks. It's doing something
I mean,
special.
I know we didn't really talk much about the art, but when you said like what makes this book stand out, I'm like, have you looked at the pages?
Evan, oh yeah, like
Evan's
yeah,
work is just
it's
so
insane.
astounding. Like I could forget to write some pages, and you wouldn't realize because the art is just making your eyeballs go, what the fuck?
Yeah, not even not when you see the mechs finally like that. I thought his
Mech design, yeah.
The mech designs, but just the architecture, this futuristic society, the people's clothing, character, the human character designs.
Yeah.
This book has everything going for it. Visually, I mean, like there are no lackluster panels that your eyes will fall on, and I'm with issue 1 being as good as it was, and then listening to you talk about the challenges on issue 2 and how and the intensity you kind of have to bring and how you have to use issue 2 to open up the narrative into more complex ways.
Issue 1 is the first date. Issue 2 is the promise of a longer relationship.
Okay, nice. Well, I'm stoked for that second date, dude. Oh my god, I cannot. That's the one problem about doing this when you get to read stuff early is then sometimes you're like, oh, now I have to wait like 4 months for issue 2, and it's just like no. But no, the wait will be worth it, and yeah, you guys are doing some real cool stuff. I love
Thank
Dark
you.
Horse. Dark Horse is good people. But yeah, so you're an Image, Dark Horse, and then Rare Flavors still going on at Boom.
Yep.
And then you're
I just saw someone actually made a recipe from Rare Flavors, and
oh, cool.
so that's a little tick. I was like, I'm gonna write this book and hopefully inspire at least one person to actually cook the food.
Yeah,
and I've had a few people cook the food now, so that's pretty cool.
Awesome. That's I mean, it's been I haven't been cooking as much because I've been door dashing, which I got to get back to cooking, man. I got to get another job if I keep getting food delivered. But like, it's so easy, but it's so expensive. But yeah, I because of that, like I haven't been cooking. But that's been a couple people have mentioned that to me too. They're like, "Are you reading Rom's new book? Like, are you ever going to cook any of this stuff?" And I'm like, man, hopefully. Like, also, like everybody's like, Blake, when are you going to start a cooking and comic show? And it's just like, I know all these things are easy, and I just got to wake up tomorrow and do it. But it's like, but no, a lot of people have been talking about that. Yeah, right. Time is the enemy for all creatives. Finding enough of it. But yeah, man, such a pleasure, and you are such a great writer, and like I said, just listening to you talk about writing and life and stuff, I could do that all day. But I know you're a dad and you got deadlines and you got all this other stuff to do. I did promise a friend I would ask you this one final question. Can you explain to the needy viewers and listeners, how do we keep a luxurious head of hair, sir? Because everybody wants to know, like, how many, like, your like leave-in conditioner. They want to know your.
I have a very simple answer: genetics.
I hear that helps. Yeah.
My dad, God bless him, passed away a couple of years ago. He was 77, and he passed away with a full head of almost neck length hair, little less than shoulder length. So, I've treated my hair very poorly ever since I was a teenager. I put crap into it, like all kinds of chemicals, shit that shouldn't be in there, and miraculously, it has continued to be what it is. So the only thing I can think of is genetics.
Okay. Well, sorry everybody. I have hair here. Like nothing
you
up
have
here though.
you have the Alex Pacnadel problem. I gotta tell this story, and I hope Alex will forgive me. When he who shall not be named got elected president, Alex said, "I'm not gonna cut my beard until that guy's out of office." Blah blah. And then, of course, it didn't happen. So he couldn't cut his beard for like an absurdly long time. And I kid you not, he's got some kind of unnatural fucking the Gray Wizard kind of beard growing abilities. Because I saw him a few months after that happened.
Yeah.
And Alex could have played the part of Radagast the Brown with like creatures living in his beard, because that thing was like a druid's beard down to, I don't know, down to his like stomach or something. I would not be surprised to see small woodland creatures take flight from it. So
Nice. That's funny. I'll have to. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna be like, you gotta come on the show now, Alex, and tell Rom stories because that's we gotta. I'm gonna
do
use.
it,
I'm totally gonna use that for Dan too. I'm gonna try and get
do it,
Dan
do
a
it.
while back. Dan, when Dan was doing Arkham, he agreed, and then we, you know, he got busy and stuff. So
Mm.
I again, like you guys have all been on my list. I've been trying to get the White Noise boys for a while. But yeah, I just I love that you guys wowed me with all this stuff back then, and you're all still doing unique, leveled up, crazy stuff now, in and out of the big two. I'm so glad you guys are around, breathing life into indie comics.
Thank
Right?
you, thank you so much. Yeah,
No
no,
problem.
it's been a joy. I started out my comics journey with these guys when I hadn't even made my first comic in 2015. I met Dan and Casper Wingard, who was
Oh
like an
wow.
honorary White Noise member,
Yeah.
and they had just done their first book, Limbo, at Image together. And then I met Alex a few months after that, and we all realized that we kind of wanted to make the same kind of comics, inspired by the same kind of writing, or inspired by the same kind of ambitions in writing, if you will.
Mm.
And so, yeah, these guys, I wouldn't be writing these stories, or be doing what I am without Dan and Alex and Ryan O'Sullivan, who did Void Trip at Image as well.
Mm-hmm.
Without these guys to constantly keep bouncing ideas off of, calling someone up at 3 a.m. going like, I just got the story idea that popped into my head. Yeah, every writer should get themselves writing buddies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Even like for just so like you're not screaming into the void helps, but like man, like having that group when you can
No,
share
screaming into the
drafts
void
and
aside, people like who inspire you
yeah,
to
like
step up and do more interesting things.
yeah,
Like I
it's
read
important.
Dan's work and I don't know how he does it. So that's always, because you always have this. I said this to Tom King as well. Like I read his work and I can't figure out how he did it. I can read a lot of work and go like, oh yeah, like I read Sandman, which is one of my favorite comics. But
Mhm.
even with Sandman, I can figure out how it works.
Yeah,
I can't figure out how a Tom King book works, but it works.
yeah,
And I can't figure out how Dan Waters books work, but they work.
they do work.
Uh, and that's it's always a great, very inspiring thing to come across
You
as a
even
writer.
told me how your books work earlier, and I can't tell you how your books work. So you even told you
Yeah,
were like,
yeah, but
I
it's
take
easy.
these two conflicting things
It's
and
easy.
make
It's
them.
easy to figure out how your own stuff works. It's very difficult to figure out how somebody else's stuff works.
Yeah. No, that's
So
I agree. Like having good people in your corner that both like lift you up and that inspire you. Like
yeah,
it's no matter what kind of job you have, it just makes your life better. So I yeah, get creative friends and stay in touch with them. And then maybe one day you'll drop a crazy book at Image about serial killers and futuristic detectives. You never know. But no, again, I appreciate the
I've
time.
just as we're on the show, I've just been told One Hand number one is going in for a second
Second
printing as
print?
well. Yeah.
Nice.
So
Hell yeah. That dude,
yeah,
that's so cool.
cool stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
very very cool.
Well, if people are buying the books, that means Rom's going to keep making them. Well, I think you'll keep making them regardless. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's the
I'll
publishers that
be
want
I'll
that
I'll
money.
be this kind of weird hobgoblin dude. Uh, uh, Occasionally, it's just kind of posting out a manuscript, going, "I finished. Now I'm gonna go away, hide on my island once again."
Go back to the woods for a few
Yeah,
months.
yeah.
Real quick. I know. Right now, like social media is weird and stuff. I don't like. Let the audience know, like best place to keep track of you, or if you got like a newsletter or something. Like what?
I do have a newsletter. You can go to flybysoul,
Mm,
FLYBYSOUL.com.
okay.
As soon as you go there, you can sign up. And that's a newsletter that I'll probably be keeping active a lot more than my other social media as I try to like extricate myself from this
Mm-hmm.
pit of
From
despair,
this madness. Yeah.
from this pit of despair that is some 16-year-old edgelord's idea of a social media thing. Like, X. What's your thing, man? It's called X. Jesus Christ. Um, so, so yeah, so come follow me. Sign up for the newsletter. But while everything burns down, I'm still on Twitter, and so you can still catch me there. I'm pretty active. But
Nice.
I've also moved on to Blue Sky, which seems like a much nicer place.
Mm-hmm.
So you can catch me there as well. I don't know how active I will continue to remain on any of those platforms. I yearn for the world to go back to the days of like, oh, cool, I'm gonna catch someone's blog and I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna be done. They don't have to
Yeah.
post at me every 10 seconds. So yeah,
We're getting there. I mean, because of, I
I'll
think
start
because of
mailing
the,
out physical letters if you
yeah,
send me if you send me
handwriting
postage.
stuff. Because I've told some clients that like I've noticed like with Twitter being crazy, because that was where almost everybody was your go-to promotional outlet, right? And
Yeah,
it seems like we are now, with like Substacks and stuff, but it's like the newsletter and blog are coming, they're coming back to the forefront.
yeah,
And I kind of like that too, because I mean, I mean, I do social media and stuff for work, so it's like a necessary evil. But I'm with you. Like the constant continuousness of it all is it gets fucking exhausting every now and then. And it's
yeah.
like, yeah, it'd be nice if we could like, if I could read a blog post and then let that simmer, and like, it's just like not
100%.
having to
Yeah.
do every like, this was my lunch, this was my dinner, my son burped and it sounded funny. I don't know, like there's like shit that like I didn't like. Rom, I love you,
I
but I
mute
didn't need
those
to know
people
all
on
this.
WhatsApp. So
Nice. Well, everybody subscribe to the newsletter. I imagine like you don't want to miss anything Rom's doing. The new stuff I'm reading from him is exceptional. And
yeah, I'm gonna start doing some cool things on the newsletter as well. Like I'm thinking every week an issue comes out. I might do a quick sort of annotated, hey,
ooh,
how did I do this? What was my thinking when I was scripting this kind of post? Maybe new issue comes out midweek, and
yeah,
I do a post sort of over the weekend each time, something like that. So yeah,
yeah, that
definitely sign on. So there will be a lot more like how did I make this comic discussion. It won't be. It's not me trying to teach people how to make comics. It's literally just me going like, this is how my brain works. Isn't it weird?
Hey, I like so yeah. Hey, there's a lot of people that like that back matter, that bonus
Yeah.
content, So anytime a creator wants to give us a little bit of insight or a little bit of B-roll or extended footage of whatever, like I'm always appreciative of it. Yeah, so everybody follow him, subscribe to him. Buy these comics or I'm going to get mad at you. I will just yell at you online incessantly if you don't, especially Dawnrunner, because that's magical and more everybody just needs to experience it. And I can't wait
Thank
for
you,
issue
Blake.
two,
I
man.
appreciate that.
Reading your work, dude, is it never fails to just like it impresses me, and both as a writer and as a creator, and then also just as like a fan of comics, like what you're able to accomplish with your co-creators and stuff. Like it's awesome. And I love that. I really love that you're being weird at DC, because I feel like DC doesn't let people get weird all the time, and I love
I
the
don't have another mode. There's no non weird setting on this appliance.
Oh, I'm gonna make that into a short. That's good. That's good. That's the content.